Hello, everyone. This is Putnam County historian Larry Tippin. I'm going to talk today about the history of the Putnam County Fair, Putnam County, Indiana. We've always taken for granted that the fair has been held at the current fairgrounds on the north side of Greencastle, and certainly has been all my life. If you can remember when it was at the city park on the south side of Greencastle, but it's got quite a history, many different places it's been held. And when, thought I'd like to discuss that today up to when it came to the current location and why we may be calling it by the wrong name. Let's start with our first published history, Putnam County, the 1879 Atlas, the history of the county, which has a section on the fairs held in Putnam County up to that time. Starting with this, it says the first fair for the exhibition of stock was held 7th day of September 1837 on the ground occupied by the Presbyterian Church, recently destroyed by fire. It was a little more than a show of livestock held on open ground. No fees were charged, no premiums were paid. The horse owned by Colonel Alexander Shore Sparrow was judged the best in that department, but the other winners cannot be remembered. So it's real neat. They gave us the date, and they gave us an idea about the location, but we can go to other sources and help narrow that down. This is from the 1864 Map of Putnam County, courtesy of Library of Congress. It's online, available to anyone. And what's neat about this, it has the detail of some of the cities and towns, and in downtown Greencastle includes the lot numbers and some significant places such as the post office, courthouse, and Jones House, which is a hotel down here. But also there's a Presbyterian Church on Lot 171. That building was constructed in 1849, and it was in the hands of the Female College of Indiana by the late 1860s and lost in a fire fall of 1873. But there's another Presbyterian church north of the courthouse on Lot 99. That building was completed in 1864, and then it was lost in a fire on April 16, 1876. So we believe that's the location they were talking about, which was the first show of livestock first fair in 1837. This is a really neat advertisement. We get a lot of information from the Hoosier State Chronicles, which has a lot of newspapers, especially the old ones, was pretty neat. This is in 1841, just a few years after that fair, and Terre Haute is saying the Putnam champion, Pharaoh's Uncle John, will stand 4 days each week. This stable in Terre Haute basically has a breeding horse. This horse and his colts have never failed to win the best premiums awarded by the Putnam County Agricultural Society, and he's going to be at a fee of $10. So we can see the value of having these competitions, particularly winning them. Going back to that 1879 history, in the year 1838 or 1839, another fair was held on an open lot near the present site of the new Asbury University building. At this exhibition, a book called Tecumseh, owned by Anderson Matthews, took the premium in that class. We can go to what's called the Pictorial History of Depaul University. Wonderful, wonderful book. Not only has the history of the university, but it also has a lot of really neat pictures. On the left, we see the first building, the first main building of the university. Indiana Asbury University was chartered and approved by the legislature in early 1837, and the cornerstone was laid for this building called the edifice that very same year, that fall, and was completed about 1842, but it was lost in a dramatic midday fire on February 12, 1879. The outer walls were saved, which you can see on the picture on the right. It's really neat to see this wooden fence in front of both of these buildings. So using the outer walls, the university soon replaced that with West College, the building they called it. And then that building was in use until 1929 when it was determined that it was no longer usable. It was taken down. In 1956, it was replaced by the Roy O. West Library, which is the current library at Greencastle. So somewhere near that building, maybe on campus or maybe off, was where that 1838 or 1839 fair was held. If you're not familiar with the university, it's about 5 blocks south of the courthouse. Started out as Indiana Asbury University, and then in 1884 it was renamed Depaul after a generous gift by industrialist Washington C. Depaul. This is a really significant newspaper from 1853. Says list of premiums to be awarded by the Putnam County Agricultural Society at the 3rd annual fair to be held in Greencastle the 5th, 6th, and 7th of October, 1853. So by saying the 3rd annual, that would imply, or we can infer, that the first one was in 1851. Now, it said in Greencastle, but didn't say exactly where. And several neat things about it. First off, a lot of the prizes were in silver cups, silver spoons. And then some of the significant committee heads, Colonel Farrow is one of them in charge of the horses. And then Reuben Reagan is one in charge of the horticulture and flower items. Reuben Reagan probably did more to promote and encourage horticulture, not just in Putnam County, but through the state. And also we have agricultural implements. So that's kind of interesting because you didn't just go to the implement store to buy your implements. Most part, you had to make them. So they had contests, who had the best plow, who had the best wagon, and so forth. That's kind of neat. In February of 1854, Daniel Thornton and Benjamin Corn of Bainbridge approached the Agricultural Society of Putnam County about having a fair there, which they agreed to do, as we can see in this newspaper, 1854, listed premiums to be awarded at the 4th annual fair, the Putnam County Agricultural Society, be held at Bainbridge, the 13th, 14th, and 15th of December, 1854. And again, you'll see the words were given in silver cups, silver spoons. It was kind of neat. We can tell where that location was. It was a half-mile west of Bainbridge on the south side of West US 36, kind of across from the grand 2-story brick home that we've always called the Archie Chad home. That's the location. You can see it's on Daniel Thornton's farm, and Benjamin Corn was not far away. 1855, it's back at Greencastle. Report of the Putnam County Agricultural Society, the 5th annual fair was held on the 26th, 7th, and 8th of September, 1855 at Greencastle. The show took place at the fairground near the depot of the Terre Haute and Richmond Railroad. Okay, this gives us some significant information now. Through other sources, we've been able to determine that it was held on the farm of Colonel John Matson. It's the northwest quarter of Section 27 of Greencastle Township. The depot they're talking about was the old Van Dyke, then the Pennsylvania, and so forth, so on. No longer in use. Veterans Memorial Highway now goes through that. And then Bloomington Street, which is now US 231, on the east side of that was where the fair was. You notice in Colonel Matson's farm, there's only one house there. Now there's a lot of houses right along the highway, but Colonel Matson's house was far off the road. And then his neighbor to the east, Alexander Bryan, acquired this farm after Matson passed away in 1870. So we've always considered that the Alexander Bryan family home. But that's where the fair was, starting that year in 1855. Continued up through 1862, we believe every year. Then we see this, January of 1863. James Allen, president of the board of directors of the Putnam County Agricultural Society, urgently requested the members to meet at the courthouse, which would be January 31st, to attend business of vital importance. Let there be full attendance of the members of the board. That's January 15th. On January 29th, 2 days before the meeting, he sends another notice out, and he calls them out, names them by name, and he says he expects them to be there for this important meeting. And this is really neat because we see some of the names of the leading agriculturists and citizens of the Greencastle and Putnam County at that time. In addition to James Allen, we see Wilson Yates, Will Daggy, and Jacob Durham as officers. And then among others, board of directors, Nicholas West, Frank Darnell, William Cunningham, James O'Hara, James Matthews, Reuben Reagan, Joel Shields, Dr. Alexander Stevenson, Dr. Dilly from Clinton Falls, Alexander Bryan as neighbor, Colonel John Matson, Clint Walls, Joseph Siddons, Ambrose Hamrick, and Joseph Fordyce. Ambrose Hamrick is also significant in that in the early 1870s, he was president of the State Department of Agriculture, or State Board of Agriculture, who put on the state fair. So it's really neat to see this. So when this group met, they decided to postpone the fair that year because of the ongoing conflict that's going on in the country. You should know what we're talking about. And it was postponed the next 4 years as well. So there was no fair 1863 through 1867 in Putnam County. And then here we see an article in 1868, the first Putnam County Fair since the war closed Saturday, success, being able to pay the premiums for in the full. Secretary Martin Donahue requests premiums be attained at once, so forth, so on. The show of cattle was especially fine. Dr. Alexander Stevenson brought in his herd. He was another leading agriculturalist. I think we need to talk about the early agricultural history and the early agriculturalists at a different time. And this long article, it's worth reading. And it goes on to say attendance was large, and on Thursday, not less than 4,000 people were on the ground. So I don't know if that was accurate or maybe just a little bit of exaggeration, but that's okay. I'm sure it was in the thousands. So it's a very significant event. And again, it's back on Colonel Matson's farm. As we can see, going back to 1879, it says when the fair started again in 1868, society is reorganized and then immediately fit up the grounds on the farm of Colonel John Matson, actually, on the east of Bloomington Road, a short to the south, and Indianapolis Road, Depaul, were continued to hold its fairs annually until the removal to the new grounds east of the city of Greencastle in the fall of 1877. So it's held on Colonel Matson's then from 1868 to 1877. We go to the 1879 Atlas, Putnam County, look at the maps, and we see a fairground is, in fact, noted in 1879, just east of Greencastle, just outside the city limits, on the farm of Andrew Lockridge. That's more or less across from Greencastle High School, a little bit north, the Perseverance Drive, Indianapolis Road area, if you're familiar with that. And you see several buildings and then an oval track. Well, the significance of that, the fairs were different back then than they are now. They weren't 4-H and youth oriented. They were the show of livestock, show of horses. Horses are very important, and other things. And it's all good and well to judge your livestock and judge your horses. But if you want to know who had the best horse, you had to race them. And that is what they did. They raced their horses. No gambling allowed, I'm sure. And it was held there every year up to 1880, just a few years. So we see Putnam County Fair open to the world. The Putnam County Agricultural Society will hold their 24th annual fair on their beautiful grounds 1 mile east of Greencastle on September 5th, 11th, 1880. Now, open to the world, one of the significance of that is sometimes it was just Putnam County people, the various fairs, and then sometimes it was open to others. So I suppose if you had a grand champion, I don't know, sheep or whatever, another country, put them on a boat and send them over. And that 24th annual fair claim kind of was at first, threw me a little bit, but then I know, go back to what they think they're saying. They don't mean 24 consecutive years, just once a year annual. So if you do the math, 1851 to 1862, and then 1868 to this time is 24, actually 25 years, but that's okay. But that reaffirms that it was held every year during that period. That's 1880. In 1881, a Richmond, Indiana newspaper has a section on statewide news. It says the Putnam County Fair, which was set for the second week of September, is now declared off on account of an impetitious season. So they're asking you to go find a dictionary and look that up. That basically just means lack of interest. So the fair is called off again. And we see no fairs through the 1880s until 1889. Say, Attorney Ader is drawn up the Articles of Association of Bainbridge Fair. After an agricultural society is organized, they will get the money set aside to put on the fair in Bainbridge, and that's what they did. And we're going back to the track now, or the fairgrounds, primarily the track, but it's fairgrounds, half-mile west of Bainbridge. This is 1879 map, but in 1883, he sold that to David Ader, one of the board of directors of the newly organized Agricultural Society. And that was his farm at that time in 1889. As we can see here in this article, Daniel Thornton has sold a total of 384 acres. He owned a lot more than that. So he sold a lot of land, and then he moved to Indianapolis at that time. So this is pretty neat. Is an article talking about the opening day in 1889 of that fair, saying it's the prettiest little ground in the state, comprised 40 acres, located in beautiful walnut grove with other trees, half-mile west of Bainbridge. And then so forth, so on, talks about the availability of wells for water. And then at the bottom of this, it talks about the half-mile track, meaning that oval track where they race their horses. Now, for comparison, the track around your local high school football field is a quarter mile. And then the track at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky, where the Kentucky Derby is held, is 1.25 miles for reference. So a half-mile track would be a pretty good-sized track. That's the start of the fair. And then it goes on to talk about the buildings. It says the amphitheater, floral hall, sheep and swine pens, poultry sheds, etc., all substantially built and meant to stay whether the fair is a success or not, and so forth, so on. And then for the bottom of that, it says on Tuesday, all the stalls, over 300 were already taken. So they had, it was a permanent buildings, permanent structures. They meant for it to be held at Bainbridge for a long time, and it was. The article goes on to continue most of the stock. They're saying, well, now we know what was there: horses, cattle, sheep, and hogs. And then it talks about some of the notable horsemen, and then there's a long list of the ones that came. So this was popular not just locally, but statewide and in other states. So it was a big deal. And then at the close of the fair, it says, everyone seems pleased with the success, attended efforts of the new Agricultural Society to give a first-class county fair at Bainbridge. Then it goes on to say Thursday was a big day, and the crowd upon the grounds in the afternoon reached into the thousands. So again, it's a pretty big deal. It was held there every year up to and including 1900. It says the 12th annual exhibit, Putnam County Fair Association, will be given at Bainbridge August 13th, beginning August 13th, continuing 4 days. The purse for the 250 trot is $150. The free-for-all pace, the free-for-all trot are $200 each. So they're not giving away silver spoons anymore. They're giving cold, hard cash. And then by saying 12th annual, that documents 1889, 1900. That's 12 years inclusive. And then the next year, 1901, on account of the Putnam County Fair to be held at Bainbridge August 13th to 17th, the Monon will have special trains running. This is from Crawford's paper, just documenting it was held in 1901. In 1902, a newspaper in Jasper, Indiana, has a whole page of the upcoming county fairs in the state of Indiana. It talks a little bit about each of them. And it says, the grounds of the Putnam County Fair Association are near the beautiful little city of Bainbridge. It goes on to talk about horticulture and the important part of bluegrass and why bluegrass is so important to the rural agriculture of Putnam County. Again, we'll have to talk about that another time. And then it names the officers. at the initial officers, which is neat: Horace Ferguson, Nathan Ader, Amos Allison, and David Ader. And then it goes on to talk about the half-mile track. And then it says the lease of the grounds occupied expired in 1900. Association was reorganized and reincorporated with the following officers: James C. Bridges, George W. Starr, Amos Allison. The grounds improvements are valued at $5,000. This is really cool information. So this was August 1902. September of 1902, we see this. The building and grounds formerly used by the Bainbridge Fair Association of this county have been sold to a company headed by F.D. Ader, not AIDS, of the city. They will abandon the fair and give race meets. All right, what happened? David Ader, who acquired this property from Daniel Thornton in 1883, died in 1894. And his widow, Belinda Ader, owned the property till her death in 1900. David Ader had owned a lot of land, a lot of buildings, significant buildings in Bainbridge and surrounding areas. So it took a while to settle his estate. But when it was settled in 1902, the deed for this property, where the fairgrounds was, passed the hands of the two children of David and Belinda Ader, now both deceased, Francis David Ader and Alice Ader Davis, then owned the property. So that's what happened. It's not like it was to a different outside company or anything like that. And that AIDS is actually Ader. Francis David Ader, I believe, went by Frank. So that's what happened. So 1902. 1903, sure enough, they're having races. The races of the Bainbridge Fair in Putnam County this week, which were the first of the Indiana Circuit, resulted as follows. The 245 trot, the purse was $500. So $500 is pretty serious money, 1903. So this was a big deal. But it doesn't look like it was a county fair anymore. It looks like 1902 was the last, except we have this conflicting piece of information. This was July 25th. July 24th, Indianapolis paper says a young man from Bainbridge was injured by the hot air balloon at the Putnam County Fair that year, 1903. So either they did go ahead and have a fair one more year in 1903, or somebody just didn't tell this reporter. Reporters can only report the best information they have available to them. And it may have looked like it had been in the past, primarily the horse races. So we're not sure if they had a fair in 1903 or not. I don't think they did, but I may be wrong. I believe the last one at Bainbridge was 1902. And then we see that there's no county fair in the next 20 years. We see a few articles like 1910, 1939, other years where they're having the horse races at Bainbridge, but not calling them county fairs. We had a few other locations had local agricultural societies, but we don't think we had a county fair all the way up to 1924. You see, the first day of the Putnam County Fair, and so forth and so on. Most interesting are the exhibits being placed Wednesday in Greencastle stores and livestock sections of the first annual Putnam County Fairs. So they have already forgotten that they've had an agricultural society and had county fairs many different times prior to that. It's been 20 years, so I guess they forgot about it. But this is the first annual Putnam County Fair, 1924, yet again, first annual fair. And we see in the newspaper articles, the Bainbridge Club girls were happy to receive many of the prizes. They're not calling them 4-H clubs, they're calling them clubs. And then also, continuing, Potato Club Award winners. So they have a Potato Club. And then they're talking about the downtown Greencastle. And then also in the stores around downtown Greencastle, the townships have displays. And then Floyd Township won that competition, including the Prevost building and some of the banks. So we can document that this fair was held in and around the downtown square in Greencastle in 1924. 1925, there's no news locally about the fair, but there's this in the Indianapolis Star where they have a list of the fairs and the dates they're going to be held. So it says the Putnam County Fair, October 1st through 3rd in Greencastle. There's no news at all about the 1926 fair, but we know they had one. On the right, we see the 4th consecutive event to begin Thursday morning. The annual fair starts tomorrow morning. So that's 24, 25, 26, and 27. That's 4 years. But the most important part is on the left. The boys and girls will exhibit club work for the first time at the annual Putnam County Fair. Well, we saw they had some club work in 1924, but this is the first recognized. And this kind of interesting. Prior to the fair, it talks about the premium list. And it starts off talking about dogs. Well, that's really important, especially the hunting dogs. Very important back then. And then after that, it says 4-H Club Department, including for Floyd Miller, who is the extension agent. Continuing, these 2 different newspapers compilation gives us the clubs that were participating in 1927, including the clothing, canning, baking, beef calf, feeder pig, breeding gilt, and poker clubs. And then it says local Greencastle girls takes majority of 4-H club prizes. So 1927 is when we're seeing the 4-H being referred to in connection with Putnam County Fair. And I'll explain why 1927 is an important year for that. Continuing though, 1928, talk about the horse show awards are announced on the west side of the square Wednesday evening. So the horse shows are still important. And then the townships have displays at the gymnasium, which would be the high school gymnasium east of the square. It's 1928. 1929, club members have day at the county fair. A special boys and girls 4-H club debut held Putnam County Fair Friday, September 13th, 1929. If club members approved the program outlined by County Agent Floyd Miller, which they did. And it goes on to note that 220 boys and girls are engaged in the club work, 4-H club work, 1929. So that's August 1929. September, County Fair to close Saturday. The Putnam County Fair end tomorrow, perhaps for all time, with the horse show on the north side of the square. The Restful band for music. So even though 4-H is becoming popular and growing, the county fair as a whole is losing interest yet again. So that's 1929. But in 1930, Putnam County Fair starts today. The first Putnam Junior Fair opens today. Premium awards to be made of the winners of the girls and boys club displays on the east side of the square. So this appears to be the first exclusively 4-H fair, or almost exclusively, which is the kind of fairs we know now. So they're not racing the horses anymore, unless they're running them around the city streets of Greencastle or something. I don't know, probably not. But now it's exclusively 4-H, 1930. So that was an important year. Let's talk a little bit about the history of 4-H, just very briefly. While we're talking about 4-H, that was kind of interesting. If you research 4-H, you won't find a specific day that 4-H was founded. It's not like all of a sudden on this day 4-H was created. It evolved over time. So clubs, like we saw mentioned here at Putnam County, began to be held in the early 1900s. We see in 1902 a recognized club in Ohio. Also in 1902, there's another one in Illinois. So they're typically tomato clubs, corn growers clubs, so forth, so on. In 1910, the 4-leaf clover with the H in each leaf was designed. And then in 1914, the Smith-Lever Act created the Cooperative Extension Service nationwide. So every state had one. And it was in the Land Grant College, which is in Indiana, was Purdue University. And then the Cooperative Extension Service became an important part of 4-H. Continuing, this is really neat. Otis Hall of Darlington, Montgomery County, just up the road from us, created the 4-H Pledge, which was adopted by the first national 4-H camp in the nation's capital, almost as written in 1927. So this is significant. First off, it says this is the first national 4-H camp, or you could call it council or Congress or whatever. So it's apparently the first time they've met nationwide in 1927. and they adopted the pledge. And then in 1973, the words "and my world" were added to the end. And if you've ever been in 4-H, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then the 4-H creed, which is something different, was developed in Wyoming in 1918. It became national and so forth. So 4-H kind of evolved over time, but 1927 was an important year, and we see statewide in Indiana, 1927, we're starting to see references to 4-H as we did in Putnam County. This is real neat. This was a summary prepared by Kenny Harris, who is extension agent, and the significant to the success of 4-H in the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. And he created a summary of the Putnam County Fair and 4-H Club Association, starting in 1931. It goes on quite a few years. This is part of it. It says 1931, there was no fair because there was no money. In 1932, the leaders held a fair, 33 street fair, 4-H only. He didn't mention 34 fair, but they had one. But in 34, they elected the officers of the Putnam County Fair and 4-H Club Association. And then there's a fair in a square, 35, 36. First fair held at Roban Park. He said they built livestock barns. So let's add value to what Kenny told us. And Kenny, he's a wonderful, wonderful person. I remember him very well. I was at 4-H from the mid-60s to the mid-70s. So I remember him very well. He was a great guy. In 1931, even though they did not have a fair, the 4-H Girls Achievement Day, I apologize, this is a very good quality. The Putnam County 4-H Club girls will display their handiwork at the Putnam County 4-H Club Girls Achievement Day to be celebrated Friday, August 21st, 1931 at quote-unquote the club on Jackson Street, half-block south of the public square in Greencastle. So even though there was no fair, the club girls did not want their work to go unnoticed that year. They don't think they had any judging or competition or anything like that, but they did exhibit their work. But there was no fair in 1931, no county fair. In 1932, there was. The annual exhibit opened Friday morning in the county courthouse. Well, how do they do this? The same courthouse we have now. It's not that big. I mean, I'm picturing, okay, did they have sheep on one floor, cows on the next, or whatever? I don't know. Obviously, they couldn't have done that. But let's find out what they did. Continuing, says the 2-gate program will open Friday morning, and so forth. The girls' entries in clothing, canning, food preparation, and baking will be exhibited and judged in this silver room of the courthouse, while the livestock will be on display in a large tent on the north side, including sheep, cattle, and hogs. So that's how they did it. And if you're familiar with the downtown Greencastle, you can picture this. I mean, you can see what they're doing. So it's really neat to have such specific information, and that's how they did it. 1933, the next year, the club members will exhibit August 18th and 19th. When it was exclusively a 4-H fair, it was typically 2 days for many years. And this goes on to say over 600 Putnam County club girls and boys are planning to exhibit their work, and it's really neat. It gives us numbers. So I want to share that with you. Approximately 35 calf club members will show 44 calves. 20 pig club members will show 30 pigs, and there were about 20 boys in the sheep club, 15 in the colt club, 10 in the dairy calf club, and 30 in the poultry club. More than 400 club girls will exhibit their work, whereas girls exhibits. So that's pretty neat to get such specific information, and I wanted to share that. That's 1933. 1934, as Kenny Harris has told us, the organization elected or appointed its officers first time, including Morris Evans, who was president, Junior South vice president, Amy Ziner, secretary, and Lucille Nichols, news reporter. They met to set the dates for the fair, which would be August 10th and 11th in 1934. Again, still a 2-day event. At the conclusion of that, they had an awards ceremony. It looks like at Greencastle High School. And they're calling it the 3rd annual 4-H fair. Okay, forget that they had all the fairs prior to that. Apparently, they're talking 32, 3, and 4. It didn't happen in 31, but they had tons of fairs before that. 35, program the 4-H club fairs announced the county commissioners have allocated $300 for premiums and then the Kiwanis budgeted $150 for entertainment, bless their hearts. And it's talking about all this empty space in the public square and so forth. So we're still downtown. So the fairs from 1924 to 1935 were held in and around the public square. And we see some years where they've got tents on the side streets. And one year they had tents almost all the way to Greencastle High School on the side streets. So that's how they did it. They had it in and around the square, and they had tents. And then the home economics, as they called it then, were apparently in the courthouse itself. 1935. As Kenny Harris told us, 1936. Exhibits for the 1936 Putnam County 4-H Fair opens Thursday and so forth. Livestock exhibits to be housed in the new Park Pavilion, and home economics exhibits to be housed in the Second Ward School building adjoining the fairgrounds, which locally is called Miller School. So this building, we've got other sources. We know it was a permanent wooden structure building in the southeast corner of Roban Park in Greencastle. And then we know they had tents and other things too. I know some people with more life experience than me talked about the fair, and they remember having harness races and also a carnival of sorts about where the baseball diamond is. Also say that after the fair, they would go and find loose change on the grounds of the fair. It was a very profitable afternoon experience for them, loose change that fell out of people's pockets. And out at Roban Park, that was in August. And then in September, we see this. Plans made for the county horse show. The entries for the horse show will close September 17th. All horses entered prior to this date will be housed by the Putnam County Fair Association. After that, you're on your own. So this fair association had I would say, traditional 4-H fair with the home economics, is what they called it at the time, and livestock in August. And then in September, they had some sort of a horse show under the Putnam County Fair Association. It was held there at Roban Park all the way to 1953, as we see here. We think every year. And then in 1954, let's go look at some of the pictures for the 1953 winners before we go. So I apologize for the poor quality of these photos, but this is neat. That's Marvin Ramsey, Russell Township, has the grand champion Jersey cow. The first thing you notice about this picture, or one of the first things, is to have tents in the background. But this is the legendary Cantor exhibiting his reserve champion Angus steer. Tom McCabe had won the champion steer that year for his shorthorn, but since Tom McCabe had won the previous year, this Farm Bureau prize goes to the reserve champion, Kenny Tor. So Ken's showing you how it's done. He's got his left hand held high with his little Angus steer, short, stocky little Angus steer, proudly holding his head up with his feet squared and his tail sticking out. We got a better picture of Ken Tor. If you like coffee and you hang around downtown Greencastle, you may have seen this one. Tom McCabe and Ken Tor both won the state fair that year for their shorthorn and Angus, respectively. So that was pretty neat distinction. I think this may be when Ken's getting his purple ribbon at the state fair. But one of the things you notice about this, his little Angus is proudly holding his head up and he's got himself squared up with his tail out, exactly like Ken has taught him to do, a testament to many, many hours they spent together, even though Ken's not even looking at him. He did it on his own. It's so cool. And if you've a 4-H'er, you know the hours of the work, the hours that you go into this, appreciate the animal being able to do that on its own. And then finally, that year, Gordon Witham won what they call the Spirit of Helpfulness and Sportsmanship. What would be the last fair at Roban Park? Because this happened. January 26, 1954, banner says, closed deal for the Fair and County Club grounds. The Country Club sure action Monday, and then 27 acres, Putnam County Fairgrounds. Well, let's talk about what happened. First off, Charles Roscoe Daggy, who went by his middle name Roscoe, owned 160 acres of prime bottomland on the north end of Greencastle. 160 acres. He died August 27, 1953. And then in January of 1954, his widow, Anna, deeded to the Putnam County Fair and 4-H Club Association for $1, a total of 75 acres, not 27. I looked at the deeds and everything, and what this is 27 acres is in the southwest quarter of Greencastle Township of Section 9, Greencastle Township, but there's another 40 acres on the southeast section quarter of Section 9 of Greencastle Township for a total of 75 acres for $1. And you'll notice that various groups and individuals have raised, it ended up being a little over 3,000 total to acquire grounds and then fit it up for a fair. And also noted too that Anna Daggy, widow of Roscoe Daggy, also January 1954, deeded to the Windy Hill Country Club Incorporated a total of 90 acres, not 65, 90 total. And on those grounds included the grand house of Roscoe Daggy, was set up on a hill east of what was then State Road 43, which the country club converted into its clubhouse. So it's kind of neat information to know this, but that's when the Fair Association acquired the grounds. Now, make sure I understand, Putnam County itself was never involved in any of the transactions. Putnam County never owned any of the ground. It was deeded directly by the Daggy family to the Fair Association. Kenny Harris, just prior to the fair, is saying the plans for the fair, says the fair dates are set for August 2nd to 7th to be held on the newly acquired Daggy Memorial Fairgrounds, north of Greencastle. Arrangements have been made for fencing the ground and constructing a building for home economics exhibits, water and sanitary facilities, electricity, and so forth. And also saying it's going to be under tent. So they really planned this very well. It's kind of neat. Read several articles about that where they put the tents where they expect the livestock buildings to be in the future, and that's how they did it. Really kind of neat. But emphasize the Daggy Memorial Fairgrounds, the enormous gift of the Daggy family. It would be, and it was solely appropriate to name the fairgrounds the Daggy Memorial Fairgrounds in the family's honor. Leading up to the fair, just before the fair, says 4 of the big tents were up today and the cement block building nearly completed. So they're talking about what we call Harris Hall, appropriately named, which is the first building you see when you come into the main gate of the fairgrounds on the south side. And we believe that was built in time for the 1954 fair. And then as the fair is concluding, the last event is the heavyweight horse pulling contest. And it goes on to say probably the biggest crowd of the week will throng to the Daggy Memorial Fairgrounds. Look at some of the pictures. Love to see these pictures. Nova Ali of Jefferson Township has a grand champion pulling boar estimated to weigh half a ton, which is about the size of Ken Torr's champion Angus steer. David Webb has a champion Angus heifer. And there's Tom McCabe, who has the champion Shorthorn steer, apparently for the 3rd year in a row. And you see the tents in the background. One of the things I wanted to show you about the tents. So that's kind of neat. See how they did it. Again, we're talking 1954. Wendell Bratton, Madison Township, has a grand champion Shorthorn heifer, which is neat. And then this Carolyn Brown Greencastle Championship wins for a safety project book emphasizing fire safety. So 4-H isn't just the livestock. 1955, the Putnam County Fair and 4-H Club Association deeded in early 1955 2 acres to Putnam County for a total of $730. It's rare to see the actual dollar amount in the deed. There's usually it's $1 and other consideration or something like that. But this time they did put the amount in. It was $730. And that's about what prime farmland, bottomland along Big Walnut was going for at that time. And then the county has plans for the new highway garage, which they did erect on the north end of the Daggy Memorial Fairgrounds. We can't emphasize enough the enormous gift of the Daggy family, not only the monetary value, Because if you do the math, it would have been probably $30,000 or so for the whole 75 acres, which would be probably, I'm going to say probably $250,000 or so now. So not just the monetary gift, the fact that we have a permanent location now, instead of having it in tents on the south side of Greencastle, Bainbridge, and everywhere else, we've got a permanent location. So we can't emphasize enough the gift of the Daggy family. And I didn't know any of this, just started researching it. So maybe we should get a dialogue started about a way to properly honor the Daggy family for their enormous gift to the fairgrounds. This is from the Putnam County Public Library Archives, which is just a photo of the winners from 1969 for the various crafts, electricity, photography, foods, clothing, home economics, and so forth. And so 1969, so this is my time. I recognize almost all the people in this photo. That's kind of neat. And then this is neat too. Jenny Taylor put this photo up for everybody to see on social media a few months ago. I asked her if we could use it. She said, of course. So I recognized immediately who almost all these people were. And many of them I know on a first name basis. And then some of them I talk to frequently. That's real kind of neat. If you I didn't know, several other people jumped in and said who they were. We believe this was about 1969 or 1970, give or take. And obviously the evening formal dress wear, or evening dress, whatever. So it's kind of neat. So looking at the county's property tax system, we can see the two different parts that make up what was originally 75 acres for the fairgrounds in the southwest quarter of Section 9, and then the southeast. That's why we know it was originally 75 acres total, not 27. You also see the country club, which was recently acquired not too long ago. It's now called Tiger Point, and some of the homes, US 231, Big Walnut Creek, and so forth. And then zooming in on that, we see some of the early buildings. Again, Harris Hall, we believe, was built 1954, the first building. We see in 1955, the beef barn and the swine barn, their clubs are talking about the new barn. So we know those barns were built in 1955. We believe the dairy barn and the sheep barn were also built at that time. The inside arena was built before or by 1957. I don't know if it was built in 56 or 57, but by 1957, we know they're talking about it. And we know the community building was built in 1957. And the horse barn was built and then added to, and the outdoor arena, we believe, was constructed in 1964. And we know the horse and the Horse and Pony Club had a lot of events on the fairgrounds in addition to the week-long county fair, originally in tents, then they built their barns. And then some of the service organizations started selling food and other small items in tents, and they've since built barns. And then also we had other 4-H groups like the Dairy Goat Club, rabbits, poultry, had tents for their groups, and they've since built barns. And now we've got other groups. I think llamas, and they're in tents now. I'm wondering if they're going to build a permanent building because those kind of animals are becoming popular. And then finally, I'm getting with this. This is the report of the Restful Union Agricultural Society's 15th annual exhibition in 1870. It said Union Agricultural Association of Putnam Park in Montgomery County put on this fair as a very significant fair, competitive to Putnam County Fair. We see in 1870s, they're getting out $2,000 in premiums. So it's not affiliated with Putnam County Fair, but we know the extension agents like Kenny Harris and for Putnam County and its counterparts from Park and Montgomery at least helped put on this fair. So it's kind of related to Putnam County. It was a big fair. And it was held through the 60s. So it was never canceled. Later, it was kind of on and off and then became the Tri-County Fair at Russellville. It was held up to the late 1980s, and it's no longer there. So I want to thank you for your time. I hope you appreciated this journey through the Putnam County Fair and the significance of the gift of the Daggy family. Now we have permanent fairgrounds beginning in 1954. Thank you.